So if you look around, you'll see Brexit, Orban, Erdogan, Trump, if you're Polish like me, Kaczynski. There are many signs that democracy is actually going through a hard time. Votes increasingly favor politicians who pursue anti-democratic, xenophobic, nationalist, isolationist agendas, who revive our tribal identities, who uncover old resentments and favor conspiracy theories. And moreover, popular support is not just for populist politicians, but also quite often for strange and dangerous ideas, and quite often they also support at the same time conflicting goals. The timing of these changes seems to coincide with the digital era. So, and especially in the last 10 or 20 years, since the beginning and the wide diffusion of the internet across the world, we see that democracies are increasingly going through a hard time. And the question is if this is a coincidence. And anecdotal evidence would say no, that it isn't, because if you look around, if you look what you're doing with your time, it's quite likely that you are engaging with people on social media. You're increasingly watching content which is specifically catered to you on the internet. And that means you're experiencing filter bubbles. And so you may be not exposed not just to ideas, but also to facts that do not corroborate your worldview. So there are filter bubbles, there are echo chambers where people and sometimes even automated bots just reinforce the same sort of ideas over and over. So we become polarized. And that's one thing. But there may be something even more fundamental. There may be a fact, a more general tendency that democracy has evolved in line with a world that ceases to exist. That's a bold thesis, and to back it up, I will need to discuss a few issues. But it seems to me that the world in which democracies have been created and developed, and in which they have thrived, is a world, from the social and economic perspective, that belongs already to the past. In the 19th and then in the 20th century, we've seen a world where there were strong, independent nation states, and they were gradually converging towards a vision of an ideal welfare state. They're converging to an end state in which you would perceive very little economic inequality. And also, human cognitive work was very important. Human work in general was important, but cognitive work was particularly valuable. And since this sort of labor was essentially the main source of value added in the economy, and gradually more and more so, this reinforced the idea that every vote should count and every voice should count, and we should include bigger and bigger groups of people so that people's ideas are better and better represented. But there is a problem. If this institutional setup is faced with a new economic reality, it may become unstable. And indeed, it seems that the economic setup is changing over time. Before, we had strong and independent welfare states. Now we have a more interdependent, globalized world. There is more and more interconnection between countries, and there is an increasing fragmentation of production across the world. We create value chains which are increasingly globalized. Human cognitive work is not as valued anymore. I mean, some kinds are, and especially if the brilliant few can earn more and more. And that's a great development. On the other hand, all these routine, repetitive jobs are getting automated. And that means, coupled with the fact that production is now heavily mechanized and more also robotized, this means that inequality will have a tendency of going up. And we already see certain data on the fact that top income inequality, measured as the share of the top 1% of the population in terms of income, and the overall income is increasing. We see some information that the labor share of output is decreasing worldwide, and particularly so in the developed countries. And so more and more output is getting directed not anymore to labor, but to the owners of capital, and also to the owners of data and software. And these inputs are heavily concentrated. Again, we see that the trend of decreasing inequality is no longer there. Now we have increasing inequality, and increasingly large groups of people feel excluded. And when they feel excluded, they are likely to support agendas that would, bring the good old times back, which is completely impossible, but not in their heads, and not in the mouths of politicians. Make America great again. Take back control with Brexit, and so forth. And also the complexity of the world is growing all the time. Now, as everything is interconnected, you see it's a big system. When you change one piece in one part of the world, that you could have effects anywhere else in the world. Someone eats a bat in Wuhan, and then you have a global pandemic. It's not just that some people may feel excluded. The other thing is that our institutional setup, the democracy that we're having, you could call it one-bit democracy, because you only have one-bit choices, like are you for or against, or do you support left-wing or right-wing. So it's basically insufficient given the technology that we have, given the advances that we have already seen. I have argued in one of the earlier episodes that for every moment in the human history, you could say, what is the maximum available, let's say, scale of state? It seems that for today's technology, the actual maximum possible scale of state is bigger than what we are observing in the policy. The world is no longer a collection of independent, unrelated national states. The degree of interdependence is only growing over time. But our policy is fragmented. Our policy is really at the national level at most, and the international cooperation is surprisingly weak. So how to rejuvenate, how to improve our democracy? No, of course it's a hard question. I would not be able to answer it directly, but it seems, at least according to the model that I created before, and I told you about it, that there are two dimensions along which we can operate. And one of them is state strength, and the other one is inclusiveness. And it seems to avoid unstable setups where, you could expect either gradual or abrupt decline in the standards of democracy. We're observing that in many places in the world now. So in order to avoid that, you would need to improve both state strength and inclusiveness. Maybe it's a contentious issue to say that we should improve state strength. After all, it's about enforcement. So indeed, it can be used for any sort of system. So it's not just for democracies, but I think it should be used to strengthen democracies. What are the means? Surveillance. And now we have increasing possibilities to improve surveillance, which doesn't feel abusive, which doesn't feel that your rights are taken. This is mostly about data data collection, data analysis, more and more including automated programs, and maybe some forms of subtle coercion. Of course, they should be implemented gradually and carefully motivated so that they wouldn't be contested in a liberal democracy. But it seems this is an avenue which needs to be taken if we want to preserve the main values in a democracy, which is like popular representation, freedom of speech, human rights, popular inclusion, and the general feeling that your voice is heard by those in power. So much for the stick. Now to the carrot. Even more important for the strengthening of democracy is what we can do to increase the inclusiveness of our democracies. Because indeed, if we just are allowed to vote, left wing or right wing once every 5 years or so, it seems not enough. There is many issues and there is many dimensions of policy in which we have strong ideas, strong opinions, and we would like these opinions to be heard. And there is technology which enables that. So it's clearly an important thing to improve the interactions between the citizens and the authorities. Like we have a lot of one-size-fits-all policies, but infrastructural frameworks as well. Maybe it's time to think about flexible arrangements, to think about specific setups that could be better catered to, the interests and the skills and the abilities and the willingness of certain groups of people to engage in policy, like small and large. So I don't see a reason why with today's technologies, the authorities could not consult the citizens much more on a daily basis on the issues in which they have expertise and interest. And it seems like the key enabler for both the carrot and the stick, for both coercion and empowerment and inclusiveness, is the digital technology. And in particular, I mean AI algorithms, because we would then have a deluge of data. And we would have to make sense of this deluge of data and to optimize for certain goals within this huge data sets. And people also, have limited cognitive bandwidth, have limited attention, and just will not follow every important policy issue that pertains to them. From my reading of several clever authors, I get that we can have one of the two outcomes when it comes to the development of democracy. Either we can improve our participation by automating politicians, and that's the bold idea by Cesar Hidalgo. Automating politicians means we would have individual AA agents who would help us and improve our participation in decision making, provide a link between us and the authorities. So that's one way. We could have improved inclusiveness, improved participation thanks to AI by automating policy to a certain extent. On the other hand, we have the vision of Yuval Noah Harari, who says we should expect digital dictatorships. Again, the same tool. AI can be used for the good or for the bad. It's not that AI will be used to serve the people. It's a situation where the AI will be used to serve the state. Which way it will go, I can't say, of course. It's a moment in human history where democracy is certainly endangered and in the need of reform in order to survive into the next decades. My final point is that there is an important mismatch between the scale of economy and policy. Economy is global. We have global value chains. We have the global network in science. The internet is a global village. And by our actions, we have caused global warming. So all of these are certainly global phenomena. whereas our policy is only slightly global. So we have some global agendas. Sure, we have United Nations, we have the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, we have several of those, but certainly the main players in the game are still the rulers of individual countries. And that is something which is a sort of a mismatch, because it's really impossible to coordinate like between 1 and 200 leaders to solve global issues. Like the example of global warming is probably the best one. You can see exactly where I'm heading. We are certainly in need of a much stronger global authority that will be legitimized and that will be responsible for various important issues that need to be tackled globally. Sometimes you also hear about tax havens, about the problem that the biggest and richest international companies and the richest individuals in the world often perform certain tricks so that their income is not taxed. But this is like a loophole in our policy. It's not something that should persist into the future. It's a failure, and this failure appears precisely because of the imperfections in coordination at the global scale. Another very important issue to be handled is our policy on digital technologies, in particular on data and on the use of big data algorithms and artificial intelligence algorithms. That's basically unregulated, and that's global. So we would need global regulation for that. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.